Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein, flying solo today as Patricia Murphy and Tia Mitchell are both out of pocket. Today is one of my favorite episodes of the week. It is our Monday Mailbag, and I'm here with executive producer Shani B., who has filtered through a pile of emails, of calls, of text messages, carrier pigeon messages, you name it, that have come our way over the last week. It is a sort of the dog days of the summer, Shani B., but our job never really lets up.
It doesn't, and I'm barely made it out alive from that avalanche of emails and carrier pigeon messages and messages in bottles. It's been great, though.
Raven messages, you can tell I've been watching House of Dragon.
All right, let's get started. We'll start off with Andy in Mechanicsville, who writes, if the FBI is reinvestigating Georgia's 2020 election, doesn't that mean there's something to it? Or is this just politics?
Andy, great question. It's sort of in the eye of the beholder, right? We know that there have been multiple recounts and audits and a barrage of lawsuits, a years-long election interference probe, now this FBI investigation into Fulton County's handling of the 2020 election. And we've had no evidence whatsoever that proves President Donald Trump's baseless vote rigging claims, no evidence of widespread election fraud. Even many Republicans, including Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, Attorney General Chris Carr, have all pushed the party to move beyond the 2020 election, to focus on 2026, to focus on the challenges at hand. And of course, Democrats have been saying forever that since 2020, that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. It was a slim but solid victory for President Joe Biden. Yet we still seem to be kind of locked in the shadows of 2020. So FBI is now reinvestigating these claims. It was this bombshell development a few months ago in early 2026 that sort of reopened the book even further on the 2020 election fraud accusations that have been, again, debunked by experts and analysts and voting rights advocates and even leading Republican figures from Trump's administration. But here we are again. There are Democrats and also many Republicans who are just sort of slapping their heads right now saying, hey, we want to move beyond that. President Trump is in office again. I mean, what will it prove? Where are we going with these accusations? Republicans like to say, including Governor Kemp, that the legislation, the voting rights overhaul, the election overhaul that passed after the 2020 election sort of allayed any concerns that Republicans had. And certainly we've seen polls show more confidence in the election system among Republicans than in the past. That's also partly because Donald Trump is in office and there's, you can see sort of flip-flop, whereas Democrats now have greater concerns about how the election played out and the integrity of the election system. But where we're at right now is the FBI investigation is ongoing. And now we know that there's this memo that was released a few days ago that showed there's a surge of FBI agents now being tasked with going through these boxes of documents. Will it show anything? Experts say no, that these have already been vetted, that this is already one of the most scrutinized elections, not just in Georgia history, but in the nation's history. But also, we also know that many Trump administration officials have something to prove to the president himself, who, of course, is the leading proponent of these false accusations that somehow this election was rigged. So it goes back to, whatever prism you want to look through the election with, that's how you can answer whether or not there's something to all this, or is it just politics? But many Democrats and many Republicans will privately say that this is just politics. This is just sort of kind of soothing Donald Trump's accusations he's made for so long. Shani B., what else we got?
All right, here's a text message from JD. Why does it matter how many times Ossoff and Collins debate? Isn't one debate the same as three?
Yeah, this takes me back, JD, because during the 2020 election, there was a lot of debate about debates. And there was some there was a very famous single podium debate between Jon Ossoff and a absent David Perdue before the Atlanta Press Club debate stage. There was also a debate that he actually had with Senator Perdue where some of Jon Ossoff's one-liners went viral. So there's a lot of strategy over the debate over debates and how many debates to accept. And it's interesting because in this case, usually the front runner, is the one who wants fewer debates and maybe one debate, two debates. But in this case, Jon Ossoff is sort of the unquestioned frontrunner here. He's leading in the few polls we've seen about the general election campaign, but he's also the incumbent coming in with a head of steam, with $30 million plus in his war chest, with all the trappings and advantages that being an incumbent have, and also with an unpopular president at the top of the Republican, not exactly the ticket, but at least the Republican Party, in Donald Trump, whose approval ratings in Georgia are in the 30s or 40s, depending on what polls you've seen. But Jon Ossoff has asked for 3 separate debates against Mike Collins, who at this point has at least accepted one, and he's at least shown willingness to do some others. Is one debate enough? Is one debate the same as 3? I mean, one debate kind of scratches the itch of seeing both those candidates on the stage together, but different questions are asked at different debates. And of course, there's different timing for debates. We've seen presidential candidates go lock head to head in multiple debates, and some of them are completely reshaped by world events and national events that happen in between their previous debates. So timing matters. The moderators matter. I've been a moderator in many debates. I'd ask different questions than someone else on the stage, right? The topics, of course, matter. Sometimes we get pushback. Oh, healthcare didn't come up at all. Immigration didn't come up at all. But that's because other domestic and foreign policy issues did come up, or other controversies or, recent developments did come up. So as a reporter, of course, the more debates, the better for someone like me. I love the kind of early primary stage because you have forums and candidate Q&As and, some debates too. But there's a lot of access to the candidates. There's town halls. And then during the general election campaign phase, there's often far fewer of these sorts of open forums. I miss the days where, every night there's another campaign event so we can get the candidates on so many different issues. The beauty is that we have got them on so many different issues. But of course, the more debates, the merrier for me. Shani B, what else we got?
Here's a question from Pam in Stone Mountain. Republicans are always asked about the crazy things Donald Trump says. What do top Democrats have to say about the rape allegations against Graham Platner, the Senate candidate?
Yeah, Shani B, this is such a good, timely question because it sort of hits at an internal, I can pull back the curtains here a little bit as a journalist, the internal mechanisms of journalism. There was a time in 2016 where kind of everything Donald Trump said, because he was a new rising candidate on the national spotlight. And he was saying all sorts of things that at the time were like, oh my gosh, no one running for president has ever said something like this before. So there was a time where kind of every other day, it felt like we were going to party leaders at the time, the late House Speaker David Ralston and Governor Deal and other folks who were front and center in the Republican Party, and asking them, okay, what do you have to say about what Donald Trump just said about X, Y, or Z? And at the beginning, they'd sort of comment, and then at some point, they got really tired of commenting on everything Donald Trump said. And as a reporter, it's important to hold officials accountable, but you also, every tweet or every comment or every public statement, it is tough to just go and say, hey, what do you have to say about this? What do you have to say about that? Because the answers become rote. And at some point, the candidates just develop a pattern of answering. There were some definite deviation from that in 2016. I remember when Speaker Ralston really came out strong against Donald Trump after one of his more controversial statements, after one of the more controversial developments. But, flash forward to right now where, Mike Collins and other leading Republicans have tied themselves tightly to President Trump. And there's very little, if any, daylight between leading Republicans and the president's agenda. Even Republicans like Brad Raffensperger and Chris Carr, who were doing the primary for governor, had a definite sort of different platform than the president. They still tie themselves very tightly to his agenda. Democrats, we're watching very closely how they respond to their controversies within their parties as well. And so when Graham Platner, who was the Senate nominee in Maine, this is a very important national election for Democrats. This is not some sort of backwater politically. If Democrats want to retake control of the Senate chamber, most of their paths lie through the state of Maine. This race is super, super important. And so when these rape allegations came out against Graham Platner, this is one of many, this is the latest in a series of controversies dogging Graham Platner, the candidate in Maine. We've asked Jon Ossoff, we've asked Raphael Warnock their thoughts on Graham Platner. And for a while, they were like, hey, we're focused on Georgia. Jon Ossoff says, hey, I've got a very, very tough campaign ahead of me. I'm focused on Georgia. I'm focused on winning my election fight against Mike Collins. But things changed a couple days ago when a woman who was a former girlfriend of Graham Platner said she was raped by the candidate years ago. She told that Politico. She said that in a CNN interview in very heart-wrenching, front-facing terms. And we saw an exodus, a chorus of Democratic officials basically cut ties with Graham Platner. And we also saw Jon Ossoff deviate away from his former statement, which was, hey, I'm focused on my race. And he said very flatly that Graham Platner should end his candidacy. Senator Raphael Warnock said the same in even more aggressive terms. I'm loading it up right now. He said that the allegations were disturbing and sickening and that moral character still matters. He should drop out of the race immediately. So this is an episode where we've seen Democrats, an incident where we've seen Democrats really go to the forefront and say, joining many around the country saying that Graham Platner should drop out. And as a reporter, we strive to hold our local figures, we ask them and hold them accountable for what the party writ large is doing. Do I want to wake up every morning and say, hey, this is happening in Iowa? What do you think about that? Not necessarily. But when incidents like this happen from either party, and this is a major national election that really could help determine, along with Georgia, who controls the Senate, it is a very valid question to be asking these candidates. Shani B., I think we have time for one more question.
I love this one. This came in from Jamie in Smyrna. Jamie writes, I saw you ran the Peachtree road race. What's the appeal to getting up so early and putting yourself through that mess? It looks miserable.
Before I answer that question from Janie B., what do you think? Would you ever run the Peachtree road race?
Oh, my God, no. I'm not a runner, so just count me out.
I started running my freshman year in high school. I had never really been a big runner. I'd always kind of been a baseball player and tennis player and that kind of thing. And I just wanted to get more involved in high school. And a bunch of my friends were running cross country for the North Spring Spartans. And that's kind of when I plunged in. I had never really run more than a couple miles. And I worked at the Concourse Athletic Club in Sandy Springs. So I started running on the treadmill to kind of gear myself up for it. And I remember one day, I didn't know what I was doing. I worked there as a camp counselor and a front desk agent, and I did a lifeguard. I did all sorts of jobs there. It was an awesome job. But I wore flip-flops to the treadmill, and I was running 4 miles in flip-flops, and someone would kind of tap me on the shoulder and say, what are you doing?
You're doing it wrong, Mr. Bluestein.
You're doing it wrong. And I figured out at least not how to do it right, but at least how to do it functionally over the next few years. I am not a fast runner, but I do love the sort of freedom of running and the mental fortitude it takes to run longer distances like 10, 12, 14, 15 miles. I haven't got quite up to a marathon, but I've run a bunch of half marathons, a bunch of 10Ks, lots of 5Ks. And I've got my family involved in it too. But really, my wife, Cheryl, we've been together for, 20-some years, since 2001, 25 years, geez. But she was running the Peachtree before me. And when I was an AJC intern in 2003, I was like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to run the Peachtree because it's such a big deal in the AJC world. And I've been running it ever since 2003. We have planned vacations around it. We've gone to weddings like July 3rd or July 4th, kind of planned those around, rearranged our schedules around it. Our kids, who are now 15 and 12, they've now run the Peachtree with us 3 years in a row. The whole 10K, our daughters without walking really. We kind of run them separate paces, but they've all run it too. They've kind of taken it as a family tradition. Heat, humidity, and hills this year was worse than most. Mm-hmm. But it's been a real fun joy. And it's really cool seeing, it's one of the few events where Metro Atlanta really unites. In the last couple of years, Shani B, I've been also a member of the Atlanta Track Club Board, which puts on the race. It's a huge part of a very busy Atlanta Track Club calendar. So I couldn't imagine July 4th without the Peachtree Road race. And it's also really cool to see a bunch of politicians do it too. Senator Warnock ran it this year, as he has in past years. Mayor Dickens sort of inaugurates the event. He kicks it off. I ran with him a little bit this year. So we were in the same wave. So I kind of went with his phalanx of security guards and staffers for a little bit. And I saw Doug Shipman, the former city council president, who's like a speed demon. This year he was running with his daughter. So it's a really cool event to see so many friends politicians and political figures and community members run it as well. So next year, we're going to get you out in the grace course, Shani B.
Oh boy, that'll be a sight to be seen.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Rick Jackson endorsements or lack thereof. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to Politically Georgia. I'm Greg Bluestein. A reminder, if you've got a question you'd like to ask us here on Politically Georgia, me, Patricia Murphy, Tia Mitchell, you can call our hotline anytime, day or night. Leave your question. We'll play it back and answer it right here on the show during our Monday Mailbag segment. That number is 770-810-5297. Again, 770-810-5297. You can also email us at politicallygeorgia@ajc.com. And if you do not leave a name, our executive producer, Shani B, will provide one for you. Shani B, do we have any no-name messages this week?
You know, I got to skim through. I think everybody's been on their best behavior, but stay tuned. Lanny in Riverdale writes, you guys really don't think Jon Ossoff will run for president. I don't either. But what about Raphael Warnock?
Yeah, we've talked about this on the show a lot, especially with Patricia Murphy, who wrote a column saying, no, Jon Ossoff is not running for president. She was the first to get him unequivocally on the record saying, I am not running for president. I'm going to pull that quote up there just to lead off with, which is this quote, I have zero interest in running for president in 2028. 2028 fantasy football is a distraction from the urgent task at hand, midterm victory to restore checks and balances, without which there may not even be a free and fair 2028 election. That's all to say. That is one of the many reasons why we do not think Jon Ossoff is running for president. It's become sort of a topic du jour among national Republicans. The New York Times has written about it a lot. We've seen columns and sort of social media posts fanning the flames of this sort of Ossoff for president 2028. I have not seen any indication whatsoever, publicly or privately, from Senator Ossoff or anyone on his team that he is remotely angling in that direction at all. I do not think whatsoever that he will run for president in 2028. You can hold me to that in a couple of years with this video and with this podcast. But I do think there is a strong sense among folks around Senator Warnock, his supporters, that he could be at least setting the stage for a potential run. Will he run? I have no idea. A lot will happen between now and 2028. But he's at least setting the stage, checking some of the boxes that precedes a potential run. Think about it. He wrote a book, a second book. That's usually a big sign. He's on a national tour to promote that book that has brought him to some swing states. He's been to Nevada. He's been to Wisconsin. He was, of course, in Minnesota amid the ICE protests. He's been a lot more on cable TV, even more so than in years past. He's always been a presence on the national stage, but he's even more so right now. He's raised a boatload of money. We've a lot talked about Jon Ossoff being this fundraising dynamo. Of course, Senator Warnock is as well. He's raised more than $300 million or so since 2020 when he ran that first campaign for Senate. And also he's got a boatload of victories under his belt. He's come in first place in Georgia 5 different elections. That doesn't mean he's won 5 different elections, but he's had so many runoffs and special elections and whatnot. But 5 different first place finishes in Georgia. And of course, he is the pulpit of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, which also lets him bring in, figures like Pete Buttigieg, like AOC. President Biden shared the pulpit with him a couple years ago. So he can play sort of kingmaker as well as being one of the voices, what he calls the conscience, the moral conscience, one of the moral compasses of the U.S. Senate. So I think he's uniquely positioned to at least think about a 2028 run. And I've asked him about that. And, he said, I am focused on serving the people of Georgia. It's the ultimate honor. But also notably, Shani B, he's not ruling it out, whereas Jon Ossoff unequivocally is. So I think we need to keep a close eye on Senator Warnock's future ambitions. Not to say we're not focusing on 2026. I know he is as well. He's going to help Jon Ossoff and others fight for their reelection battle. But here in Georgia, Senator Warnock is, I think, much more likely to run for president than Senator Jon Ossoff. What else we got, Shani B?
All right, next is Justin in Kennesaw, who writes, if Jackson is the nominee, Why isn't Burt Jones endorsing him?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because usually we see this sort of rallying around the wagons, rallying around the flag, circling the wagons sort of mentality in politics from both parties. Once you have a nominee, the party lines up and supports him or her. We've seen that with Keisha Lance Bottoms, with her former adversaries saying that, hey, we lost, but we're going to back Mayor Bottoms. And we're seeing that to a degree with Rick Jackson. I mean, look, he's got legislative endorsements. He's got almost every statewide constitutional officer, Republican constitutional officer is backing him. He's got a lot of activists who are backing him. But there's one notable exception, and that is Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. And there's some reasons why. I mean, this was a brutal, grueling, awful, nasty campaign that even longtime political experts like the dean of Georgia political scientists, Charles Bullock, he said, I have really not seen a battle as intra-party battle as grueling and brutal as this since the 1980s. So there's few exceptions, and that's partly because the money spent. Rick Jackson spent more than $108 million on his campaign. Not all of it was tearing down Burt Jones, but a lot of it was spent tearing down Burt Jones. So that's one part of it. There's this awful, defamation legal battle going back and forth that is still pending. Between both campaigns have kind of attacked each other. A lawsuit targeting Burt Jones's campaign, and Burt Jones's company has counterattacked Rick Jackson. So that is playing out in the courtrooms as we speak. Those lawsuits are still pending. And then there's the nasty matter of the $20 million or so that was spent by that shadowy group, Georgians for Integrity, before Rick Jackson got in the race. The origins of that is still up in the air. Who is behind that money? Well, Burt Jones and his allies still are convinced that it was, if not Rick Jackson, someone very closely tied to him. And Rick Jackson says he has no knowledge of anything to do with that group. So there's a lot of personal reasons why I'm not surprised Burt Jones hasn't endorsed Rick Jackson yet. But yeah, it's fodder for Democrats to say, look, there's still disunity on the GOP front. Even if Brad Raffensperger, Chris Carr, all these other former adversaries of Rick Jackson have lined up behind him, Burt Jones is still that leading figure who hasn't. Shani B, what else we got?
We have a rule breaker, Greg.
Uh-oh.
Yes, this one did not include a name. And as you stated earlier, if you don't leave a name, I give you a name. So we're going to hear from Eunice in Americus, who writes, if Ossoff is winning by 13 points and Bottoms by only 5, does that mean some Georgia voters are picking Democrat for Senate and Republican for governor? How does that even work?
Great question, Eunice. Yeah, that happens. It used to not happen that frequently. It used to happen a lot, and then it used to happen not that frequently in Georgia. Now it's happening, if not a lot, happening more often. And these, of course, are called the split ticket voters. I feel like, Shani B, these are the voters that have decided the last 4 or so elections in Georgia. You've had a lot of split ticket voters, especially in 2020, but really in 2022, go with both Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican Brian Kemp in that election. And we called them at that time Kemp-Warnock voters. Brian Robinson, the Republican strategist, has coined the term the deciders. So I'm going to kind of use that more and more because there's no such Kemp and Warnock aren't on the ballot this cycle. But I feel like these deciders, these Ossoff-Jackson voters will be really pivotal. Will there be enough to elect both Ossoff and Rick Jackson? Will there be enough to or there'll be too few and to help Republicans win? We'll see. But there is a reality out there where we could have a Senator Jon Ossoff who's up in the polls and a Republican Governor Rick Jackson, who at least in the Fox News poll was still trailing Keisha Lance Bottoms. But most analysts think that's going to be a very, very close race. I mean, even Republican strategists right now give Ossoff a slight advantage over Mike Collins. He is an incumbent. He is running against a president with lagging approval ratings, as well as Mike Collins, who is not the sort of name brand Republican that Governor Kemp would have been, for instance, had he run. And so he has a lot of these inherent advantages, whereas Rick Jackson has this financial fortune. He has the outsider appeal, and he's also going to make sure voters, not just in Atlanta, but throughout the state, are reminded of some of the controversies that dogged Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms when she led Atlanta for that term. So that race could be very, very close. And those split ticket voters, those deciders, those Ossoff-Jackson voters could be that decisive factor. Okay, that is all the time we have for today's show. If you found us on YouTube, welcome to our channel. And please click the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can also follow the Politically Georgia podcast on Apple, Spotify, or any podcast platform. Wherever you're listening, we always appreciate your comments, ratings, and reviews. We'll talk to you next time on Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia. And we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.